The establishment, the greenies, love to sit up there like they're God and tell us how guilty and evil we are for having cars and homes and swimming pools and factories. Meanwhile, they use these laws to shut down our factories and move them to China and India. They know exactly what they're doing, and they must be fully routed. This cancer cannot be left anywhere. And they've committed such incredible crimes. They've reached for the world through this green tyranny. Lord Monckton, I mean, do you agree with me that we can't just discredit them? They've committed crimes. They must be brought to justice?
That, I think, is the fairest thing to do with people who have terrified children in schools, lied and lied and lied again in official publications, invented a threat where one doesn't exist, magnified it where one might exist, and generally worked the world up into a fervor of terror over what turns out to be a complete non-problem. And how do we know it is a non-problem? Well, we know it by measurement. The UN and its fellow travellers in the climate extremist green movement have been using what are called computer models to make their predictions with. Now, these are essentially a whole lot of zitty teenagers sitting in dark rooms with too many bagels and burgers, picking their zits, picking their noses, pecking at the keyboards, and making stuff up. That's how the UN does the science of climate. But the real way to do the science of climate, like any other science, is not by modelling, which is of only limited use and should never be used as the primary tool, but by measurement. If I took my tie off and said, how long is this tie, you could ring round all the manufacturers and you could say, how long are the ties you make, how many of them do you sell? You put that into a computer model and make a guess, which would probably be wrong. Or you could say, give me your tie and a tape measure and I will measure it, which is going to give you the more reliable measurement. Of course, the measurement is. That's going to give you the answer. And by measurement, it has been established over and over and over again in the last few years, with papers coming out as recently as just a couple of months ago, showing that the outgoing radiation that is supposed to be being trapped down here in the Earth's atmosphere is escaping out to space very much as it always did. That means it's not staying down here to cause warming. That means the warming effect of CO2, though it is not non-existent, is very small, harmless, and beneficial.
And we know they've lied about the Earth.
You need to have.
And we know the Earth has actually been getting colder and that they hid that decline in premeditated fraud.
Well, I think they were very naughty. What they were trying to do in that particular email from the ClimateGate emails that are exchanged between the leading mad scientists of the world who have been stirring up this scare is they were trying to hide the fact that although temperatures were shown to be going up in the real world by measurement, the proxy, the so-called bristlecone pine proxies they were using to try and reconstruct past temperatures, when they came to try and reconstruct the temperatures of the present time, appeared to show that temperatures should have been falling. And it was this mismatch between the real temperature record and the temperature record as reconstructed in that brief period where we had a real temperature record to check it against, that showed that the record of past temperatures where we didn't have instruments was entirely unreliable. It was that they were trying to conceal, and they were trying to conceal it deliberately. It was clearly intended to be dishonest. And the extraordinary thing is that first the House of Commons, then the University of East Anglia whitewashed this away and said that nothing incorrect, nothing wrong had been done. Here are scientists lying to each other and to us in the hope of persuading us to spend trillions upon trillions in shutting down the economies of the West. Notice that you don't hear these green campaigners saying that China should clean up its filthy, polluting coal-fired power stations where they haven't bothered to put the fly ash trappers and they haven't put the new circulating fluidized bed techniques into the combustion chambers. All of these things they need to modernize. They can well afford to modernize it, but they don't do it because they don't care about the pollution they're causing. Do the Greenies campaign about where the real pollution is going on in China, in India, in Indonesia, in Russia, in Brazil, in South Africa? Do they heck? Their intention is to close down the countries of the world which are the environmentally cleanest because these are not environmentalists, they are communists, and their aim is to destroy the West.
And they've said that. I mean, we've got the head climatologist at NASA, we've got Maury Strong, we've got Ted Turner saying we must destroy industrialized society, but only in the West. I mean, a crime against humanity, and of course you go over the numbers of how many people will die in the third world under the carbon regime that was in the Copenhagen Treaty. We'll talk about that, plus all the new scandals that have come out. And I'm not talking about the stuff from a month ago with the Himalayas, where they used a photography student's report to claim they were melting. No, I'm talking about all the new stunning information coming out. Straight ahead with Lord Christopher-Monckton. Long segment coming up. Stay with us. We're going to take a few calls for Lord Christopher-Monckton. Your questions for him, 1-800-259-9231. Don't forget, coming up in an hour and a half, we're premiering the new film, Invisible Empire, New Order Defined, exposing these criminals. Jason Burmans' new film premiering at prisonplanet.tv. You can order the DVD at Infowars.com. They're now shipping. Next week, Police State 4 comes out on Wednesday. You can pre-order that now. Lord Monckton, so much to go over here. I can't even keep track of it. Every day a new scandal. Every day it's proven that all their science is fraud, premeditatedly. And then this one, Financial Times of London. Global warming graph attacked by study. A key piece of evidence, climate change science, was slammed as exaggerated on Wednesday by UK's leading statistician in a vindication of claims that global warming skeptics have made for years, namely Lord Monckton, who first exposed the hockey stick. And now we know that Mann has been involved with Jones and others at the core group engaging in this, what can only be called racketeering. So let's go over this and the countless other scandals that have come out, because it's positive this is all coming out, but it's almost like they're coming out too quick. We don't have time to take each one and get it out to the public.
It is quite extraordinary how in the last few months, since the ClimateGate emails were first revealed, there's been a kind of breaking of the logjam, and scientists who for years have been wanting to write papers saying what nonsense this is are now finding the courage to do so. It's very interesting, and this statistical report from the UK is very significant, because the UK has been the most true-believing of all the sappy world governments on this issue. And so much so that in 2004, when the Russians under Vladimir Putin wanted to get a briefing for their Academy of Sciences on the global warming scare, it was the British government they asked to send a delegation to do the briefing. And Sir David King went across with those people. However, Dr. Ilarionov of the Russian Academy of Sciences, who is a formidable mind, is also very careful, and he got together half a dozen skeptics, one of whom told me the story of what happened. Sir David King began coming out with the usual string of lies about how the climate was doomed, etc., etc. Fact after fact was simply incorrect. And eventually, Professor Paul Reiter, who was one of those who've been invited, the world expert on malaria, who says that global warming will not affect the spread of malaria pretty much at all, he went along and he stood up, he said, it's no good to David King. These facts are simply not right. And he began challenging to David King on his facts. David King was furious. He had never faced such a challenge before. He stormed out of the meeting, taking the British delegation with him, leaving the field entirely clear for the skeptics, who then gave a marvelous, thorough, comprehensive briefing to Dr. Ilarionov, who, in summing up that meeting, in just 3 pages of text, gives one of the best summaries of why global warming is not and can never be a global crisis that any National Academy of Sciences has ever delivered. But here's what happened next. Tony Blair met Vladimir Putin at one of these endless world government summits of the G8 or the G20 or the G77 or whichever piece of arithmetic you like. And he said, look, let's do a deal. If you agree to say that global warming is terrible and shut up your Academy of Sciences, get it to say the opposite of what it believes to be true, I will let you into the World Trade Organization with most favored nation status. That's what goes on. There's no truth behind any of this. And as you're quite right, it's now very, very difficult to keep up with the endless tide of information about how it's the sun and it's the sea and it's the clouds And as we're about to discover from Iceland, it's also volcanoes that really dominate the climate.
Let me raise that. I have a Twitter question